This program is funded by a generous grant from the Oregon State Capitol Foundation, facilitators of the History Gateway at the State Capitol. The Capitol History Gateway, enhancing the visitor experience at the Oregon State Capitol to explore, discover, and engage. It was the 1840s. After the bitterly cold and tortuously difficult experience of crossing the Rockies, the Oregon Trail ended here. Native Indians in the region called it the Willamette, meaning a place on the river near Oregon City. Drawn to the spectacular emerald landscape, mild winters, and the abundance of elk, beaver, and salmon, it was heaven.
There were French trappers out here. There were some farmers that had come, some Indians and others gathered. And one gentleman had a grist mill that was worth some money. He died and he had no heirs, but there was no way to pass deed because there were no deeds issued at all.
It was clear that a lot of different types of people intended to put down roots in what would become the Willamette Valley. Settlements were springing up. There was conflict. There was a need for rules. On May 12, 1843, a meeting was called at Champoeg, already a gathering place for Indians, settlers, and fur trappers.
So people got together at this place called Champoeg and decided they'd form some kind of a government. The issue was, should they be part of Britain's government or should they be with the territory of the U.S.?
Dozens of people showed up for the meeting, wanting to have a say in what happened to them. They decided to put it to a vote.
So they had to figure out a mechanism or a way to count those votes. So they drew a line in the sand. And the people who were for the United States were on one side, and the people who were for the Canadian territory were on the other side. But when they counted, they realized it was a tie. Well, there was this gentleman named Joe Meek. He saw an opportunity. So he walked across the line with his French trapper buddy, bringing the balance of power in that vote to the U.S. territory.
And that's how Oregon created the provisional government.
Joseph Lafayette Meek, a fur trapper originally from Virginia, was one of the most prominent voices in Oregon's fledgling development. He took to wearing a bright red sash, imitating the French-Canadian trappers that worked for the Hudson Bay Company. It was said they had a good relationship with the local Indians, and Joe hoped this attire would convince the natives to treat him the same way.
Well, it turns out that Joe Meek, who had just made this deciding vote, was Oregon's first politician. He saw the opportunity in that move across that line, and he got himself elected to the first territorial sheriff.
Never one to shy away from the public eye, Joe enjoyed his role as sheriff and became well known for his flamboyant behavior and colorful quotes. Once, when asked how long he'd been in Oregon, Meek replied,
"Well, since Mount Hood was a hole in the ground."
Now there was payback for Joe. He had to hop on his horse in the dead of winter, ride all the way to Washington, D.C., as commissioned by the provisional government.
Now that they'd chosen to become part of the provisional government, they needed a meeting place, somewhere to gather and start working on the laws of the new territory. Perhaps as much to get out of the now infamous Willamette Valley reign as to have a central place to corral all the new decision-makers, Oregon's first capital was built on the banks of the Willamette, near Oregon City. That location started a spirited contest that lasted nearly 15 years. By a legislative act in 1851, the territorial government moved the capital to Salem from Oregon City. In 1855, it was moved to Corvallis, only to move back to Salem the same year. The first official Capitol building had just been completed and occupied when on December 30th, 1855, it mysteriously burnt to the ground. In 1859, Oregon officially became the 33rd state in the United States of America.
It's really easy for us to remember when we became a state because it's Valentine's Day, February 14th, 1859. But there's not even a telegraph across the United States. So Washington, D.C. telegraphs to Missouri, and there they have to send it overland to the post office on the West Coast. But unfortunately for Oregon, the post office is in San Francisco. So they have to put it on a ship that goes up the coast, up the Columbia River, and gets as far as Oregon City on the Willamette River. There, they have to send it overland to Salem. If we hit a good day on the freeway, it takes us maybe 45 minutes from Oregon City to Salem. It took the man on horseback 30 hours. So we in Salem figure we're a double holiday state, because we may have become a state on February 14th, but the people in Salem found out about it on St. Patrick's Day, March 17th.
Perhaps the St. Patrick's Day celebration of Oregon statehood was summed up best by one Henry Clay Houston of Corvallis, when he wrote,
The brass band played Hail Columbia, Yankee Doodle, and a quantity of powder and whiskey was consumed on the occasion.
The Holman Building in the business section of Salem served as a temporary capital from 1859 until the new building was completed in 1876. It was an elegant statehouse design patterned after the U.S. Capitol. The wheels of government began turning, and so too turned up a succession of unique individuals, designing and building our 33rd state.
One of the most interesting governors Oregon has had in many years is Oz West, elected in 1910. He served for only 4 years, but in that 4-year time span he accomplished a lot. Oz West, being a reformer, was also a big believer in an initiative petition process which had just started in the state. He was a backer of that before he became governor. In fact, part of the reason he got elected. He supported women's suffrage. He was also a prohibitionist.
Described by one historian as by all odds the most brilliant governor Oregon ever had, Oswald West became known for creating the Oregon highway system in a most unique manner.
It's 1913. The automobile is just coming into play, and there was a need to have highways. Well, it's pretty cheap to build a highway on the beach. You just drive on the sand. Didn't cost you anything. So Oz West, being a pragmatic man, decided that that would be one way to get it done. But the other thing that occurs is that in many states on the East Coast, the title goes right to the water line. So if you've got a hotel on the beach, it's your beach. Oz West is a reformer. He got a bill passed in 1913 that said that all the beaches along the Oregon coast became the highway of the state. But what's unique about that? Oregon is one of the few states in the Union where the people of the state have access to all of the ocean beaches. There are no private beaches in the state, thanks to Governor Oz West.
The state of Oregon was contributing to the young American government in significant ways. The state highway system, the initiative petition process, and the preservation of natural resources. The Capitol building was abuzz with energy. Then, it was aflame. On April 25th, 1935, fire again destroyed the Capitol. Back to the drawing board for the third time. Oregon legislators hired the New York firm of Trowbridge and Livingston to design the current building, which was dedicated October 1st, 1938.
The slogan back in the 80s for Oregon was, "Oregon, things look different here." This capital is unlike any other capital in the United States. The lines are simple. It was built during the Depression and with Public Works Administration money. Hence, we got a beautiful building that didn't cost very much.
A 4-story structure of modern Greek architecture, it was completed at a cost of $2.5 million and is the 4th newest capital in the United States. The exterior is faced with white Danby, Vermont marble.
It was criticized in the beginning. People expected it to be traditional with a dome like Washington, D.C., called it a birthday cake, and they had some negative feelings about it in the beginning because it was such a departure from the way other capitals look, but I think now they take a lot of pride in it.
The rotunda, the halls, and all of the lobby areas are lined with a warm, delicately polished rose travertine from Montana.
The rotunda is, of course, my favorite part. It's magnificent, and people are always in awe when they come through the revolving doors.
The floor and staircases of the rotunda utilize large squares of Phoenix Napoleon gray marble from Missouri, with borders of radio black marble from Vermont. If you look closely, you'll see artifacts in the marble, fossils created millions of years ago. Throughout the building are elegant murals depicting the early stages of the development of Oregon, painted by Depression-era artists Barry Faulkner and Frank Schwartz. Another unique feature of the Capitol building are the carved marble inscriptions.
Plato's Republic is where the inscriptions came from, and if you read them, you understand a lot about what government is supposed to be.
One of the more striking elements in the Oregon Capitol building are a multitude of marble sculptures. Created by New Jersey artist Ulrich Ellerhusen, they add character and texture to the building, as well as telling the pioneer story of the way west.
The old part of the building is so symbolic, so it tells a really good story of Oregon and its formation.
Perhaps the most distinctive feature of the Oregon Capitol building is the Golden Pioneer at the top of the rotunda. The culmination of Allerhusen's work on the Capitol building can also be called one of his greatest achievements. Symbolizing the spirit of the pioneers that made their way to the Willamette Valley from the Oregon Trail, the Gold Man faces north, but looks to the western horizon.
Our Gold Man, he's 23 feet tall, so I always tell people that he's taller than Freedom on top of our national capital. And he had a really interesting trip to get here because he was cast in New York and he had to go through the Panama Canal to get to Oregon.
When the Pioneer arrived in Salem in 1938, a massive effort was required to raise him to the roof of the Capitol building. Long before the advent of helicopters or hydraulic cranes, a system of pulleys, levers, and old-fashioned muscle was used to hoist the statue to its final position. Cast and shipped in bronze, the Oregon Pioneer was gilded in gold leaf to prevent the bronze from tarnishing. Weather and oxidation required regilding every 20 to 25 years. And as with all things, the costs kept going up. Private donations and community fundraisers paid most of the costs, and in 1983, one little girl started a memorable statewide event.
Jenny Borden, who was a third-grade student at Hayesville School in Salem, went to her Representative Zajonc at that time, and thought that the Capitol Pioneer looked pretty shabby at that particular point. You know, the gold was just about gone, so she thought we ought to be doing something about that. Representative Zajonc came to my office and said, is there any way we could get the kids of Oregon involved in this? And we thought that was a pretty exciting idea, so my staff took that on, and we put together a curriculum about the state capitol building and the Gold Man, and made that curriculum available to all the schools in the state of Oregon. I saw many different projects. I mean, some were cake sales, others had the line of dimes at a basketball game. It culminated on the Capitol steps. Students from all around the area came to Salem. We had a big check put together to present to Governor Atiyeh at that time. I think we were pretty excited that we were able to earn as much money as we did. In fact, there was enough money to regild the Capitol that year. We had close to $20,000 that we were able to put with the state treasurer to hold for the next regilding of the old Pioneer. And what it really did, it really brought the kids of Oregon into the Capitol building, a feeling of this is their capital. And this happened in Eastern Oregon, Southern Oregon, all over the state, not just in the metropolitan areas here. So it was really kind of an exciting time for the kids of Oregon to be involved in their capital, making a difference.
From the Golden Pioneer down, the beauty of the Capitol plan is enhanced by its utility. The building houses several elected state officials, the governor, Secretary of State, and the state treasurer. Both the House and the Senate do their work here.
Thank you, Representative. Those who are of the opinion the bill should pass will vote aye. Those opposed no. Clerk will open the voting system.
Spacious hearing rooms provide Oregonians an opportunity to participate in legislative decision-making and to watch state government at work.
The Oregon State Capitol is the people's house. It's the place where the people's representatives that are elected by them make the law.
And Oregon's first landmark law was being challenged. The bill, passed by Oz West in 1913, declaring the seashore from the Washington line to the California border a public highway, was put to the test in 1967.
Oswald West was the forerunner of the concept of public beaches. The bill and the effort back then had to do with highways when wagons were still traveling on the beaches to get from one place to another because there weren't roads.
The 1913 bill designated Oregon's tidelands, the wet sand portion of the beach, as a public highway. In the 1960s, private developers along the coast began challenging the law, saying that, in fact, the dry sand portion of the beach belonged to the upland owners.
In 1967, a bill was introduced by the State Highway Department to try to stop a motel owner, primarily in Seaside, from setting up his lawn chairs out on the beach. The guy did it to create a show of private property rights, and it alarmed everybody. And then a developer from Nescoen decided to dump rock all over the beach. They were the front page of newspapers for weeks and weeks of what was going to happen to Oregon if things like that went forward. So there was a tremendous outcry. And of course the governor went to Seaside and showed where that property line was by that motel owner. And sure enough, people said, we can't put up with something like this. It would look like California, and we cannot be California, and we never want to be California.
The legislature was spurred into creating House Bill 1601, the Beach Bill. Then Governor Tom McCall described it as one of the most far-reaching measures of its kind, enacted by any legislative body in the nation.
Through the course of the 6 months of that legislative session, there were continuing problems with that bill. Eventually, the governor came in to present his viewpoints on the bill and declared that maybe the line between public and private ownership should be at 16 feet. When we checked the benchmarks by the U.S. Coastal Geodetic Survey, that included many coastal towns and cities.
The Highway Department did an aerial survey of the entire 400 miles of Oregon coastline, from Astoria to Brookings, to determine the best elevation line to divide private property and public lands. The recommendation? 5.7 feet.
At 5.7 feet, I could support it, and all but one House member and one Senate member from Curry County voted for it. Even though the bill mentioned 16 feet in the beginning, in a practical application, it's 5.7, or the line of driftwood, or the line of beach grass. And so Oregon did become then the first state in the nation to do this.
With a reputation already established as a state with a forward-thinking government, Oregon lawmakers came off the landmark beach bill exhausted and were launched right into another groundbreaking fight: returnable bottles and cans.
This was a difficult time in history. The industry was going to what's called the canning industry, and the cans had no value. The industry didn't want them back, and so people began throwing them away on the beaches, on the roadsides, the streams. And what we wanted to do was stop the trend from a throwaway society. So we introduced a bill in 1969 legislative session and had a heck of a time trying to get it out of committee in the House side. I have many friends on the State and Federal Affairs Committee, but they said, my gosh, Paul, labor is against it because they're afraid they'll lose jobs because we've established all these canning operations and everything's based on no return to bottles and cans. And then Associated Oregon Industries and management was opposed to the bill. And we'd already gone through the beach bill fight, and now I introduced this bill to put a 5-cent return on bottles and cans, and the lid absolutely blew off the House State and Federal Affairs Committee. And sure enough, it was defeated on the House floor and sent back to State and Federal, where it was committed to death. The Speaker of the House voted against my bill. My own political party, Mr. Chambers, in the interim, carried on a tremendous statewide citizen activist group, had farm industry people who were seeing bottles thrown into their wheat fields and broken, and glass was everywhere, but mostly those gosh darn cans were everywhere that people were drinking popping beer out of now.
Governor McCall, who didn't support the bill the first time around, jumped in this time, and House Bill 1036 became law in 1971.
It just caught on tremendously, and that was the intent of the bill originally. We've instilled the thought in people that things have value. People will bring things back if they have an incentive to do it. That's what the bottle bill did, and 9 other states have agreed that it's a good concept. I guess it's a highlight of my 26 years in the legislature. The Capitol building was a tremendous workplace and a great amount of anxiety for me, but the bottle bill was a star.
Throughout Oregon history, we've seen very interesting people that had influence over the population and how the government evolved. And all of it happened right here in this building.
You never get tired of looking at this building.
Over the years since statehood, there have been a number of significant and historic pieces of legislation passed in the halls of the Oregon Capitol. Laws with reverberations felt around the entire country. But in 1993, the reverberations were more physical than legal.
I was here in '93. I remember coming here. I nearly fell out of my bed that morning because I live in Salem. When I got here, the House floor was completely shut down. We had to hold all our meetings in room 50. 10, 15 more seconds, the whole dome would have come down. I would say that we're not doing enough. We have to completely spend somewhere around $260, $70, $80 million to lift the building up, go on it, and completely retrofit, put pads under there for the earthquake that's coming. There's a master plan, extraordinary master plan, to build a building over there which you need for other state agencies, move all the legislature into that, work on this building for 2.5, 3, 4 years, redo it, not only underneath, but completely remodel it. And it's just a matter of, are we going to make the political decisions to do it? This is what it is. This belongs to the people of the state of Oregon. This is an extraordinary capital. School kids are coming here all the time in large numbers, including today. They're in this building, and it's unsafe. You know, somewhere enough of those people are going to say they need to fix the Capitol, they need to fix our house. I think it's hard to understand she's hurting because when you drive by it, we just clean it, the marble sparkles. It's so white, and the gold man so glistens in the gold. So I think it's really hard to get anybody to believe that she's in really, really bad shape. Her exterior, she shows well. Doggone it, she shows well. I feel bad about that. She shows so well, but she's hurting so much on the inside.
Thank you, Representative. Further discussion?
In 2001, the Oregon Legislature created the Oregon State Capitol Foundation, a group of 25 citizens whose sole purpose is to preserve and enhance the state capitol and its grounds. In 2005, the Legislative Assembly entrusted the foundation, through the proceeds of the sale of Pacific Wonderland license plates, to create a Capitol History Gateway, wherein visitors to the Capitol can explore the building, discover its meaning and history, and engage themselves in making a better state.
1, 2, 3, go! Thank you.
The legislature responded, and on Oregon's 155th birthday, the first phase of the Capitol History Gateway occurred.
The mission of Oregon's new History Gateway at the Capitol is to ignite belief and to stimulate involvement in Oregon's democracy. And that's a model for the kind of citizen involvement that makes Oregon a better place to live, to learn, to work, to play, and to raise families.
The foundation also realizes that there's no visitor experience at the Capitol if there's no state capitol. And therefore we are dedicated to ensuring that the master plan, which has been adopted to retrofit the Capitol for earthquake resilience, is fully implemented so that this building can continue to stand.
The stars are aligning. The Capitol History Gateway has been launched. The Oregon Master Plan has been adopted. The next step is for the public and the legislature to get the job done.
Democracy is not a spectator sport. So I'd like to ask you to repeat that after me or with me. Democracy is not a spectator sport. I think you can do better than that. Let's try it one last time, loud. Democracy is not a spectator sport. Thank you.
Beneath the Dome has been sponsored by the Oregon State Capitol Foundation. Supporting your state capitol is easy. The next time you get new license plates, check the box for the Pacific Wonderland plate. Proceeds from the sale of these plates are split between the Oregon State Capitol Foundation and the Oregon Historical Society.